Hey girls, happy Tuesday. I'm going to post this video today to kind of wrap up chapter 2. We didn't get to everything I wanted to, so I'm just going to give you a quick little crash course on the ratification of the Bill of Rights, because that's the last section that we actually have in our notes. So great job yesterday. Everybody seemed to have really gotten the grasp of the Virginia plan, the New Jersey plan, and why they wanted to accomplish either forms of governments. So looking at the ratification of the Bill of Rights. So to ratify means to approve or to sign into law. And so this was the topic of discussion. How can we pass the Constitution? How can we ratify the Constitution as quickly as possible? And so, believe it or not, the nation was actually split into two different factions or groups with different interests. And these two groups were considered Federalists, which were people who wanted to pass the Constitution, and Anti-Federalists, people who did not want to pass the Constitution. The idea behind the Anti-Federalists was that they did not approve of this new venture towards, giving the central government more power. This group was still particularly very concerned with they were still very afraid of a larger, overall, overarching, more powerful central government, and they feared that it would take away the rights of the individual states. Again, this type of fear is rooted in the previous oppression under Great Britain. So the Anti-Federalists opposed the Constitution because it lacked a Bill of Rights. And again, they're afraid of their individual rights being violated. So they said, okay, let's compromise. We will ratify the Constitution. We will vote on the Constitution to go through if there is a section dedicated to preserving individual liberties, to protecting the rights of the individual, because that's what they were concerned with. The Federalist Papers were written by Federalists like James Madison and Alexander Hamilton, and they outlined the key ideas of the Federalists who supported the Constitution. These Federalist Papers served to kind of show the people where they were coming from and why they should join their movement. And the struggle for ratification took place in every state. So let's take a look. Before the Constitution could take effect, a heated debate between those in favor of the Constitution and those who opposed it took place in all of the states. So before it could even be signed into law, people are arguing about whether or not it should be passed, if this is the best form, these kinds of debates. So the Constitutional Convention adjourned September 17th, 1787, and there were drastic changes in the plan for government. These changes surprised some and angered others. This new national government that was established would greatly reduce the power of state legislatures that were previously very, very powerful under the Articles of Confederation, and it would completely restructure Congress. We know that initially the Articles of Confederation, there was only one branch of government, and it was the legislative branch, and it had equal representation per state, and there was only one house. The framers outlined the process for ratifying the Constitution. Voters in each state were to elect representatives to the state ratifying convention. And to become law, the Constitution had to be ratified by 9 out of the 13 states. The two factions that I briefly mentioned at the beginning of this presentation were the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. Federalists said, yep, love the Constitution, let's sign it into law. Anti-Federalists opposed it. Again, fear of a larger central government and the fear of individual rights or liberties being taken away. All right, so looking at the left, Anti-Federalists. They opposed the Constitution. They were afraid of a too strong national government. They thought that only a small republic could protect rights. They drew support from small farmers in rural areas, and they thought that a Bill of Rights would be necessary to protect individual rights. And girls, when we say individual rights, these are your speech, assembly, religion, right to bear arms, things like that. The Federalists supported the Constitution, and they wanted a strong national government. They thought that the Articles of Confederation were too weak to do what was necessary for the government to complete its tasks and fulfill its responsibilities. They thought that a larger public could best protect individual liberty. They thought that the bigger the government and the bigger the people living in it, That's the best way that you can protect individual liberties. Whereas Anti-Federalists thought that each individual state was better at protecting individual liberties. Rather than this large national government, this big government, they thought that the states were better at kind of preserving individual liberties. So they didn't like the idea of an overall central government that was kind of delegating laws and things like that to the smaller regional governments. The Federalists believed that a Bill of Rights was unnecessary, and they drew support from large farmers, merchants, and artisans. So as we can see here, we are going to see a split. The Federalists were your James Madison, your Alexander Hamilton, your wealthy, your elites, and then the Anti-Federalists, more of your common man, your Thomas Jefferson and things like that. So that's what we're going to see here. The Anti-Federalists recognized a need for stronger national government, but thought that the Constitution betrayed ideals of American Revolution. The Anti-Federalists, again, they're saying, why are we going back and giving power to a central government? We were just freed from the reign of Great Britain. Why are we giving up our power that we just secured? They saw the Constitution as an assault on state sovereignty, meaning they saw it as an attack on the individual rights of the state. Remember how those colonies had the right to rule themselves? So the Anti-Federalists are seeing this as taking a step backwards from that. Republicanism and liberty of the people. So they're seeing this document as kind of breaking down everything they fought the British for. They believed that the national government would become too powerful and eventually start oppressing the state governments, and then ultimately, oppressing the people and taking away their rights. Their biggest deal was the fact that there was no no Bill of Rights that guaranteed civil liberties to the people. They thought that this was the scariest part, and this was the deal breaker for them. The Federalists were enthusiastic supporters of a national government. They thought it was a good idea. They thought that it would help their country run much more smoothly. They feared a central government that was too strong, meaning they were hesitant about, giving the national government this much power. However, the only thing scarier than a too powerful national government was one that was too weak. The fear here, to put this into perspective, is let's revisit Shays' Rebellion. So Shays' Rebellion, the government of Massachusetts could not put down an uprising of 3,000 farmers against the banks and against the courthouses. They called on the central government to send troops or to send some type of relief or assistance in managing this situation. And because the central government didn't have the power to tax, they did not have the power or the means, meaning the ability to send help. They can't pay soldiers because they don't have any money. They don't have the right to declare war. They didn't have enough powers. Yeah. Oh, sorry, that was my friend Mrs. Kaz. They didn't have enough powers, but where am I? Federalists, yeah. Because if you think about it, girls, how scary would that be if Pennsylvania was invaded by the Dutch? And if the Dutch come and invade Pennsylvania and start overtaking the town, Pennsylvania is going to need help. Pennsylvania and the other 12 colonies, that would be great if they could all band together and help Pennsylvania fight the Dutch if there was an invasion. But who's going to organize that? Well, the central government. Don't we have an army? No, at this point, they have no money. They can't pay their troops. So they aren't able to facilitate or get those kinds of things going. There was no organization because there was no power. Who's going to be the commander in chief? There's no executive branch. It was just super problematic, this weak government. And so that the Federalists said, listen, the only thing scarier than the government being too powerful is not having a powerful government at all, because then how are we going to defend ourselves against foreign invaders or against each other? They thought that a sufficiently powerful national government would strengthen the fragile union that they had, and promote the public good. The government would be empowered to defend against foreign enemies, to regulate trade, meaning really just to make sure that business state to state is fair and that, Pennsylvanians aren't ripping off New Jerseyans and things like that. And they would put down internal disturbances like Shays' Rebellion. And they thought that the government, they said, this is a flawless plan. They said the separation of powers, and the separation of powers is separating the government branches into three. So that's your legislative, your executive, and your judicial. By giving each of these government branches different responsibilities, we are actually able to make sure that they check one another and there won't be an abuse of power. Because if the president decides to act unconstitutionally, Congress has the power to impeach him or her. And also, if the legislative branch tries to pass a law that goes against the Constitution, the judicial branch is there to say, hey, you can't do that because it's unconstitutional. They're practicing judicial review. We're not going to get into it all right now because it's a couple slides later, but really the separation of powers also creates a system of checks and balances where each branch checks the other branch and makes sure that that branch isn't abusing power. Let's see. Oh, wrong thing. For the Federalist Papers, they're the papers that tried to convince everybody to ratify the Constitution. And the writing team consisted of big names like Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, John Jay, and they wrote under a pen name Publius. And this was one of the founders of the Roman Republic. So they used this name to write 85 essays convincing people to ratify the Constitution. Papers 10 and 51 argued that the Constitution would balance the influence of different factions. So remember how we saw the issue where it was a bunch of farmers, merchants, artisans, small farmers, big farmers, bankers, shopkeepers, things like that. All these different groups of people who are different. We also have the North, which is super, everything's agriculture at this point, but the South is highly agricultural and the North is becoming a little bit more industrialized. Basically, papers 10 and 51 argued that the Constitution would hold all of these people, all these different groups under the same standard, which would help unite the country and keep peace. And they also said that with all these different factions, it's better because if we're only focusing on state governments and we're not viewing the country as a union or as a whole, there's a good chance that perhaps a state in the North would try to go and fight against a state in the South because of how different their views are. But with this binding document that holds everyone to the same standard, holds everybody equal under the law, that risk is much lower, according to the Federalists. They said that the principles of government would limit national authority and they would preserve liberty, meaning that our principles of government, like republicanism, like sovereignty, they would keep the national government from overstepping its power and preserving the liberty of the people. So this document circulated throughout the states, and it was a classic statement of American political theory. I remember reading these papers in here at St. Basil's and also in college. They were collectively called the Federalist Papers. The Anti-Federalists also published their own essays, but they weren't as great. They were called the Anti-Federalist Papers. Their biggest fear was that we as individuals would lose our liberty. Protecting liberty was their chief concern. They believe that certain unalienable rights and fundamental rights ought to be explicitly ascertained and fixed, meaning that these rights of ours to freedom, life, liberty, happiness, speech, assembly, right to bear arms, these have to be listed in order for these to be preserved. So in this essay, James Madison argues that the Constitution would create a national government large and diverse enough to balance the will of a popular majority with minority rights. He believes that the smaller the society, the fewer probably will be the distinct parties and interests composing it, and the fewer the distinct parties and interests, the more frequently will a majority be found of the same party. And the smaller number of individuals composing a majority, the more easily they will concert and execute their plans of oppression. If you extend this sphere, and you take in a greater variety of parties and interests, you make it less probable that a majority of the whole will have a common motive to invade the rights of other citizens. Okay, what does this mean? Think about it this way. What James Madison's trying to say is that if we give more power to each of the individual state legislatures, there's a better chance that there's going to be conflict. Whereas if we expand this sphere and include all of the states in this union together, we will see a less likely probability that there would be conflict between these interest groups. Think about it. Like I said, there are farmers, merchants, bankers, soldiers, artisans, shopkeepers. There are so many different people with so many different interests and backgrounds throughout the 13 colonies at this point that unity is tough. And if we're gonna only focus on individual state legislatures, then we are going to eventually turn into 13 sovereignties that are just fighting against each other. James Madison says that rather than these small little state legislatures, like let's say Virginia, rather than chancing this small group to fight against each other, for the farmers to revolt against the merchants, things like that. We already saw in Massachusetts that the farmers went up against the bankers and the judges in Shays' Rebellion. To avoid this type of conflict, what James Madison suggests is to just widen this entire sphere, right? Make it a big republic instead of a small republic. Because it's easy to fight with people if you're with them all the time in this small group. But if you're in a big group throughout the colonies and you are all bound to the same laws through the same constitution, there's a chance that, there's less room or probability for anyone to be oppressed. You have a number of different interests floating around. And what James Madison is saying is that this is the perfect opportunity to really set ourselves up for peace and for success. That's the purpose of one of the Federalist Papers. So the fight for ratification, because they did not trust the government, the Anti-Federalists wanted the basic rights of the people spelled out in the Constitution, and they struggled over the Bill of Rights, and it became a key focus in the rights over ratification. The Anti-Federalists were not giving this up. The Federalists were better prepared. Again, they're all elite, educated men. They're putting together these ideas very quickly, whereas the Anti-Federalists were made up of the commoners. The Federalists targeted small states because smaller states were more in favor of this idea of a central government to protect them. At this point, Delaware was the first to ratify. The ratification was harder in larger states because even though the larger states would have more representation, they were still stuck on this idea of staying sovereign, being a sovereign entity on its own. They didn't want to give up any of this big power to the central government because they were afraid that it would make them equal to the smaller states, which ultimately it's doing that. But it's key to overall peace. They promised that they would add the Bill of Rights, and they said that this promise would be the key to winning a lot of the other states who weren't so sure. So eventually all 13 states are ratified. All 13 states ratify the Constitution. So Congress made the Bill of Rights one of the government's first priorities. The ideas for these rights had been voiced in the Declaration and other places, right? These are your life, your liberty, your pursuit of happiness, your freedom of speech, your right to have, to practice whatever religion you want, your right to fair trial by jury, and things like that. Okay, so the purple are the Federalists and the yellow are the Anti-Federalists. The red portions are the people that are evenly divided, and the green are the non-voters. So if you look here, you'll see that it looked like there was a pretty even split, but the Federalists were able to take this victory. Massachusetts, very splotchy. Again, remember, it looks like it's actually more anti-federalist. And if you think about it, that's your small farmers that aren't willing to give up their rights to the government, as it makes sense that they feel this way because of what happened with the Shays Rebellion when their farms are being taken away. Let's see. I'm trying to pause this. Okay, whatever. So, that's all we're going to look at today. I'm going to post your study guide, and you guys are going to have your assessment tomorrow. Your assessment is going to go through chapters 1 and 2. So please be prepared. I'm posting your study guide. Work on that today and make sure that you take this information into account when you're working on it.